That's why it's not getting out. Okay. Had some settings wrong there. Hopefully you did get the Star Wars theme, and hopefully you know this is the Dan Clement Show. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. Got a lot of work done outside yesterday at the complex here, or the compound, some people might say. Just doing some spring cleanup. Overdid a little bit. I'm a little bit sore today. Nothing I can't handle with the fibromyalgia that I'm suffering with. The second thing I wanted to talk about is if you look over my left shoulder back there alongside the American flag, and I'll have to see what the etiquette is on that, which side the American flag needs to be on. I'm probably having it on the wrong side, but I'm going to check that out. I also have the Confederate battle flag, and that's in honor of our American history. Right or wrong, good or bad, the United States of America has history. And for people, and this goes back to last week where they were taking down Confederate monuments in New Orleans because they wanted to, they thought it would upset too many people. And folks, that type of thinking to me is foreign to me because it is our history. I didn't, and you didn't, and the generation that's living today didn't have anything to do with that. And I think by us recognizing that and honoring our history, good or bad, that it'll keep us from repeating that history. And no matter what Professor Timothy Snyder says from Yale, history does tend to repeat itself if we don't learn the lessons from history. So again, there's just another sort of ding in his academic armor. We talked about him yesterday. There's a ding in his academic armor again, because history will repeat itself if we don't learn the lessons from that history. So that's why I have that Confederate battle flag over behind me. It's a 3x5 flag. It was very inexpensive, and quite honestly, they don't even sell them on Amazon anymore. And it's one of those policies that Amazon instituted. Try not to offend people, and I'm sorry, folks. The anti-freedom crowd that Amazon would have offended by continuing to sell the Confederate flags, especially the Confederate battle flag, would have been so small they wouldn't have noticed. They would not have noticed a dip in their sales. Enough people out there that are right thinking like me, that love history, good or bad, knowing that we didn't have a hand in it, knowing that we had nothing to do with it, but yet we still need to remember it. We still need to honor our history. And I should say, hopefully a third thing here that's going on is I switched the monitor that my open broadcast studio on the main computer is actually broadcasting from. My buddy Dave was telling me that my voice was a couple seconds off from my lip, sort of like my lip syncing wasn't that good. I can't even remember that group, Willie Vanilli or whatever it was. Anyway, so I got to thinking about why that was happening, and my third monitor that I had it on is actually hooked through a USB port. So what I'm going to do in the future here, I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to spend any more money on the studio right now, is I'm going to get a HDMI hub and plug that into my main computer, which is on my graphics card, and then get they make the VGA to USB converter and hook it in that way. That way it'll still go through my GPU and I'll be able to switch those back. But I was noticing a lot of lag yesterday after Dave told me that. I was noticing a lot of lag between my third monitor and my broadcast monitor. And so it's actually better today. It's doing very well today. So other than me not having my settings right on my computer, so you can actually hear my voice on the microphone. and I'm looking at the open broadcaster on my main computer on the second monitor, and I'm really close. I don't see any delay in me speaking, and it's like a mirror image. And up on the third monitor, when I was testing things out yesterday, that wasn't the case. So hopefully that takes care of the YouTube side of that. All right, today, there's two things happening in the Capitol today. One, President Obama. Oh, he was been on my mind because I've been doing too much research. President Donald Trump is signing an executive order for religious liberty and religious freedom and freedom of association. Now, as you might contemplate if you haven't been following this, the anti-freedom crowd out there, and this is the best article I found on this was over at Slate.com. Trump is planning an unconstitutional assault on LGBTQ rights. I had to read that, and I was laughing most of the time I was reading that because, one, honestly, if you sat down across the table from somebody in the anti-freedom crowd that thinks this way, as this Slate article by Mark Joseph Stern puts out, and you read and studied the Constitution with them, they still wouldn't know what the Constitution said. In all honesty. Because they don't want to know what the Constitution says. When it benefits them, they'll say something's unconstitutional. Throughout the 8 years of the Obama administration, everything was constitutional. Oh, and if you said anything against it, well, that's just a dusty old document that's in our American antiquity that doesn't apply today. That was the line from the anti-freedom crowd the whole 8 years. Another thing I seen this morning, and you didn't see them during the whole 8 years of the Obama administration, was Operation Pink or Code Pink. These were the anti-war feminists out there, the mothers and things like that. And they were in the news this morning on One American News Network. I caught the end of the segment. And I'm going to talk about them a little bit tomorrow. I'm just making a note so I don't forget about Code Pink. And tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about the Second Amendment and an article that was shared with me on Facebook. I just couldn't believe that about the Second Amendment and me defending myself as taking away somebody's rights to a fair trial. Only from the anti-freedom crowd do you get that kind of thinking, that kind of ideology. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Second Amendment and the anti-freedom crowd tomorrow. We're going to talk about Code Pink. We're going to talk about the wars that are going on, which I don't agree with. But today, like I said, there's two things going on Capitol Hill. One is President Trump's expected to sign an executive order about religious liberty, protecting a First Amendment right. Now, you know the anti-freedom crowd out there is going to go judge shopping for somebody out in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to try to halt this executive order. But the problem with that, they have no constitutional standing to halt this executive order. He is protecting a constitutional right that we already have, that we had prior to the Constitution. This is a God-given right of religious freedom, freedom of association. And the whole idea that comes down with this LGBT thing, talking about, oh, this is an unconstitutional assault, is because some courts out there erroneously sided with the LGBTQ community against photographers, against florists, against bakers. When they were customers for years, they just sold them to products to the LGBT community with no questions asked. But when they came in to ask if they'd participate in their ceremonies, their wedding ceremonies, and I do put that in quotations, when they were asked to participate in these wedding ceremonies, they said, no, my faith won't allow me to do that. It will not allow me to participate in your ceremony and celebrate that. And that's where the LGBTQ community went up in arms. They went judge shopping. And they got these judges that are erroneously applying the law. They're talking about 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law, which has nothing, which cannot. And see, this is what the anti-freedom crowd doesn't understand. This is what a lot of biblical, denominational, biblical theologians don't understand about the Bible either. The 14th Amendment cannot contradict another amendment, and it doesn't when it's applied correctly, the equal protection under the law. When you're talking about law, especially on the federal level, when you're talking about marriage, the Supreme Court said gay marriage is constitutional. because they cited, among other things, equal protection under the law. The problem is there is no federal law governing marriage. So if there isn't a law governing marriage at the federal level, then how can that be equal protection under the law? And if a state decides that they don't want gay marriage happening in their state, they don't want it going through their court systems or anything, and they put a law on the books, the question still stands, is that equal protection under the law? They made a law that they do not wish to participate in gay marriage and the quantification of gay marriage, and they're protecting one group over another group. And so the equal protection of the law, I think people stretch it out way too far than what it was originally intended to be. But it cannot, the 14th Amendment cannot nullify the First Amendment or anything in the First Amendment. It has to coexist with the First Amendment. And that's where we fall down on this whole argument, especially the anti-freedom group. This is where they fall down on their arguments. So they're really out in force. Indivisible, Common Cause, they're talking about this on Facebook and on Twitter. And they are really, really trying to jam Congress people up, Congresspersons, their representatives and senators up about this issue. They're really trying to jam these people up about that. So that's what's going on today. And then the other thing that's going on today are actually two things with the, well, they sort of have something to do with each other. They're talking about health care. They're talking about the repeal of Obamacare. And for whatever reason, these anti-freedom Republicans out there are trying to mix the two, trying to conflate the two, repealing Obamacare and then wanting to put a replacement plan in place. And I have some articles here I need to talk to you about, especially about the left likes the CBO when it agrees with them. And I don't, and trust me, this is just full disclosure, I do not trust the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. Now, in their research, when they're bringing out facts about certain things, I think they're spot on. But it's their application and how they apply these things and how they, some of their research with the numbers, and we'll talk about this, especially with the pre-existing conditions when it comes to health care and health insurance, the projections, the numbers they're projecting are projecting out to 2026. And I'm afraid too many people who are intellectually lazy out there do not read beyond the headline, beyond the numbers, and then find out, well, these projections are projected out over the next 9 years. Okay, so there's an issue with those. And if you really dig into the history of pre-existing conditions, as far as healthcare, this again is a government-caused condition. If you go back into the history, and I have an article from Forbes magazine, Avik Roy, posted back October 9, 2012, the Mitt Romney era, talking about free market approach to pre-existing condition is better than Obamacare. And he goes down and he talks about this. And part of what he talks about is he goes into the history of where pre-existing conditions came from. And I have 5 ways, I have another article, we're going to talk about 5 ways to make health insurance great again from the Foundation for Economic Education by Diana Furchtgott-Roth, where they talk about these different free market solutions. And one of them is something I've been touting for a long time and could take place, the place of Medicaid and Medicare is medical savings accounts, MSAs. If everybody, instead of having employer-funded, or not funded, excuse me, employer-provided health insurance as a benefit, and would just have MSAs where the money that the employer would put in to buy and purchase their employees' health insurance would go into your MSA account, and then you put in whatever, and those formulas can be figured out. And if you lost your job and went on to another job, guess what? Your health insurance would follow you. What a radical concept. If I lose my job and go on to another job, I still have the same house insurance. I still have the same auto insurance as long as I'm able to afford it. And if I lose my house insurance or my auto insurance, I can pick up other auto insurance. Now, it depends on auto insurance. If I lose it because I was a moron out there driving while under the influence or reckless operation or whatever it was and lost my license due to my high-risk reckless driving, and I want insurance, and I got to pay more for that. Okay, that's not a foregone conclusion. But a medical savings account would eliminate the pre-existing conditions that the anti-freedom folks out there are talking about, and the anti-freedom folks are not telling you the whole truth. Go figure that one. The pre-existing condition numbers in the United States are vastly lower than what they're talking about because they're only getting into the headlines of the information. And the headlines have these huge numbers that are projected out to 2026, and they don't take into account the market forces that could come to bear through competition and moving our health insurance model from a predefined benefit from employers to something that follows folks throughout their life. And they could do this, including those on welfare and including those folks that are retired on Social Security, whatever it is. If they had an MSA account with a catastrophic medical, I'm not exactly sure of the terminology here, but a policy that would cover anything that was catastrophic. The MSA would actually take care of minor stuff like broken bones and physicals and lab work, stuff like that. And that insurance policy that would cover just the catastrophic would be minor as far as payments. And that could actually be paid out of the MSA. It's a free market solution, folks. I've talked about the MSAs for years. I think they're a good deal. I don't think the insurance companies like them because they won't make as much money off the MSAs. I believe that's what's behind a lot of this. And honestly, I think government workers would benefit from MSAs. Congress folks would benefit from MSAs because if you notice, I'm wearing my Convention of the States hat. If the Convention of the States comes to fruition and we get a constitutional amendment to limit the terms of the congressmen and Supreme Court justices and federal court justices, they would actually need an MSA. Would be better for them because they could take it with them on their next job after they leave the federal bench or after they leave Congress. And the same way with the federal employees. Matter of fact, MSAs, quite frankly, in my opinion, would benefit so many different industries in the private sector that it's unreal. It would benefit the unions. It would benefit manufacturers. And that's one of the reasons why my wife and I were talking about this yesterday. As we were looking at vehicles that are coming by, and she says, "You like that vehicle?" And I says, I just love the looks of a GMC Sierra pickup truck. I always have. But I told my wife I'm not going to buy one because of what happened during TARP. They took tax dollars that they shouldn't rightfully have taken to prop up a company that should have went through bankruptcy and would have come out the other end very financially healthy. I don't think GM or Chrysler would have went bye-byes if they went through bankruptcy. I think the unions would have been hit pretty hard because of their lavish retirement pensions for their employees. And and we see California, the teachers unions, they're getting in trouble with their pensions because they're underfunded. And we see municipal workers out there that are making more on retirement than they did while they were working. How does that work? That's a sweet deal if you can get it, but how does that work? So there's a lot of things going on in our country today that I would have to classify that would go under the anti-freedom movement. Because I think that the only pre-existing condition that we have here in the United States is anti-freedom. The founding fathers dealt with that with Britain. That's why they fought a Revolutionary War. That's why they penned the Declaration of Independence so the United States could take their place among other nations, so that the United States could protect the freedoms and liberties of its citizens. Men and some women died during the Revolutionary War for this freedom, for our freedoms today. so they could set up a government that would limit the federal government and it would protect our freedoms. But we see that we don't have that much anymore. We have a federal government that's totally out of control fiscally, morally, and constitutionally. We have Republicans that, quite frankly, if I'm reading the tea leaves right out there are a lot of people out there that are very upset with the Republicans over this budget deal right now, because there's a lot of Republicans that broke their promises. There was 118 Republicans who didn't vote for that. Now, I'm going to keep an eye on that and do some research on that to see if these guys are actually in safe, because we got the midterm elections coming up next year, see if they're in safe districts where they don't have to worry about Democratic opponents. I'm not sure if they are or not. I'm hoping they voted because of principle. I noticed that my representative, Lou Barletta, was not on that list. And I am going to be sending him an email about that, how unsatisfied or how unhappy I am with his decisions to vote for the omnibus spending bill. And folks, to me anymore, the excuse of the government shutting down, so we have to pass this bill, that is so old and so tired. That excuse actually needs to be replaced. And you know how I feel about excuses. Excuses are the truth wrapped up in a lie. What were they doing this whole time? What the committees that they set up in the House of Representatives to go, the Ways and Means Committee and other budgetary committees they have set up in the House of Representatives, what in the world have they been doing? Doesn't seem like they're doing their jobs to me. And they need to be voted out. I think 2018 is going to be the year of the anti-incumbent. I really do. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. I think there's going to be a political bloodbath in 2018. I think there's going to be a backlash because of what Republicans are doing right now. I honestly believe that. All right, folks, if you notice over my right shoulder, it'd be this shoulder here, those are cans of the official drink of the Dan Clement Show, Rocky Mountain High Brands hemp oil infused drinks. Now they have energy drinks and they have just plain drinks. They have iced teas, they have lemonades, they have lime in the coconut drinks, and they also have mango and citrus and other energy drinks. If you want that energy boost, everything's natural in it, no chemicals in them, and they're very tasty. Well, I love the lemonade. It reminds me of Fresca. It really does, even though none of these are actually sugar-free. Some of them are reduced sugar, but none of them are sugar-free. I only drink one a day anyway. And the hemp oil seems to be helping with my fibromyalgia. I can't say that it's a cure for it, but it's helping with the pain levels in my fibromyalgia. So the official drink of the Dan Clement Show is also the sponsor. Now, full disclosure, I do have stock that I purchased in Rocky Mountain High Brands drinks. Today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Proverbs, chapter 19, verses 8 through 9. He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. And this verse 9 is key, and I think this really speaks to our day, and we really need to heed this admonition here. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies shall perish. Sooner or later, folks, if you repeat lies long enough and are a false witness, you'll be found out, and people will disregard you. They won't listen to you anymore, in other words. Today's quote meal comes from OS Genius. If ours is an examined faith, he's talking about Christianity here. If ours is an examined faith, we should be unafraid to doubt. There is no believing without some doubting, and believing is all the stronger for understanding and resolving doubt. If ours is an examined faith, and folks, you can use this quote meal to talk about anything. If ours is an examined position, political position, life position, whatever it is, we should be unafraid to doubt. There is no believing with some doubting, and believing is all the stronger for understanding and resolving that doubt. If we have doubts and we study these things to resolve these doubts, it should strengthen our faith. especially in God's Word, but throughout life. This is a life principle here that you can use. Today's short Bible lesson is Few Will Be Saved by Al Shannon over at biblicalproof.wordpress.com. And I was reading through there. It's a good lesson. It talks about the narrow road and the wide road and some other implications with that. So it's a good lesson. I encourage you to go over and read that and study that for yourself. Okay. Today's National Day of Prayer. I didn't get that out to begin with, and this is one of the reasons why they're bringing this up. And President Trump may sign this executive order today. It sounds like, from all intents and purposes, he's going to do that. Now, I have this political article before I get into the Slate article. I have this political article that, let me see here. White House aims for Thursday signing a religious liberty executive order. And this is by Ben Schreckinger and Haddis Gold over at Political and this was posted on the 2nd of May of this year. President Donald Trump, who has thrilled social conservatives by delivering on numerous campaign promises to that constituency early in his first term, has been reluctant to wade into this particular issue, people close to him say. President Trump has invited conservative leaders to the White House on Thursday for what is expected will be a ceremonial signing of the long-awaited and highly controversial executive order on religious liberty, according to multiple people familiar with the situation. Two senior administration officials confirmed the plan, though one cautioned that it hasn't yet been finalized and noted that lawyers are currently reviewing and fine-tuning the draft language. Thursday is the National Day of Prayer, and the White House was already planning to celebrate the occasion with faith leaders. The signing would represent a major triumph for Vice President Mike Pence, whose push for religious freedom legislation backfired mightily when he served as governor of Indiana, and his allies in the conservative movement. The original draft order, which would have established broad exemptions for people and groups to claim religious objections under virtually any circumstance, was leaked to the nation on February 1st. The handiwork, many conservatives believe, of Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, who have sought to project themselves as friendly to the LGBT community. Liberals blasted the draft order as government licensed discrimination, and the White House distanced itself from the leaked document in a public statement. Plato, and getting back to my quote meal, Dave said in the chat room, and look, folks, this examination of what we believe and what we think should be something that is a bedrock of our lives, folks, of everything we believe and everything we confess. Plato said that unexamined life is not worth living. Okay, Plato stole it from Socrates. Doesn't matter. It's still factual. An unexamined life is not worth living. Unexamined political positions aren't worth having. Unexamined religious positions, biblical positions, aren't worth having. Because if you don't examine, I grew up Catholic, folks, and if I would have never questioned them, if they were never questioned by Al Holty, and if Dave hadn't sat down and talked to me about these things and actually questioned my belief in Catholicism as it was taught as a biblical principle, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. My political beliefs. I grew up Republican. In my young adult life, I was Republican. The first president I voted for was Ronald Reagan in 1984. And I was Republican up to 2007 until this immigration and amnesty issue came up, and I decided I could no longer support the Republican Party and their views on this. So I went in search of another political party. I'm now a proud member of the Constitution Party and have been since 2007. And so my life, and I think all of our lives, need to be an examination. And if we find things to be faulty or false, we need to make a decision. Now, some people make the decision they're not going to change. And some people make the decision that I was wrong all the time and I need to make a change in my life to be more accurate with the truth. It's that simple, folks. And the same way with this religious liberty executive order that Donald Trump is supposed to be signing today. This is something that was important to Mike Pence, and it was important to a lot of Christians out there, especially in light of what's going on with the LGBT community, these lawsuits against these florists and these photographers and these bakers, and people being put out of business because they don't want to participate in something that their faith excludes them from doing, which I believe they're on firm biblical ground when they talk about they don't want to participate in gay marriage because the Christian faith, let's put it that way, doesn't support gay marriage in any way, shape, or form. And you have to really, really twist the scriptures. I mean, to the point where they're not scripture anymore, to say that the New Testament supports gay marriage or supports the LGBTQ lifestyle. So this one here is by Mark Joseph Stern, and this is over at Slate.com. This was posted yesterday, May 3rd. And he's talking about on Tuesday, Political Reporter, that President Donald Trump will sign a long-rumored executive order legalizing. See, this is their terminology. You got to be careful with terminology. Legalizing discrimination against LGBTQ people under the guise of religious freedom. I have some questions about this. I'm not going to read much of this article because he lost me in that first part. And you don't hear, what frustrates me the most about this, you don't hear these anti-freedom people like Mr. Stern, Mark Joseph Stern over there at Slate. You don't hear him speaking out against Islam, who actually goes out and kills gays and folks of the LGBTQ community over in foreign countries. They literally kill them. And as of yet, now I'm talking mainstream Christian thought here. I have yet to hear anybody in the mainstream of Christian thought advocate for the murder of anybody in the LGBTQ community. And yet they make assaults on this religious freedom, and we know what they're talking about. They're talking about Christianity. They're talking about Christianity, and just wording the beginning of the article, legalizing discrimination against LGBTQ community. I'm going to take us out of the religious realm to begin with. If I, as an American citizen, do not want to associate with those in the LGBTQ community, that's my right, and that's my protected freedom to do so. Doesn't matter what. I don't have to give any reasons why. As an American citizen who's a sovereign citizen of the United States of America, I do not have to explain to you why I don't want to associate with somebody. Maybe I don't want to associate with bald people. Maybe bald people don't want to associate with people who have full head of hair. I don't care. I know I'm using an absurd example here because we're talking about something people can't help because it's genetics. And I'm not going to get drawn into the argument to, well, the LGBTQ community, that is all about genetics, when it is not. It absolutely is not. Especially about the transgender. That is gender dysphoria. It's a mental condition. And, folks, there's been study after study reported about this, and the anti-freedom crowd just does not want to look at this or admit that it's actually out there and that it's actually worth looking into. So, because of my religious faith, if I don't... Dave says your viewership is about to drop 100%. I knew he was going to say something about that. I was just using that example, Dave, not that I ever act upon any type of impulse like that. But getting back to religious freedom, so my freedom to practice my religion the way I see fit, now I'm using a secular argument here, that is a protected right under the First Amendment, means that if I don't agree with your lifestyle, I shouldn't be forced to participate in that lifestyle. Now, as a Christian, as a New Testament Christian, it's my obligation to take the gospel to you. I cannot separate myself from you when it comes to sharing the gospel or even being friends with you. Can't do it. The New Testament does not allow me to do that, folks. God's Word does not allow me to do that. However, if you ask me to participate in a ceremony or some other type of activity that is strictly LGBTQ oriented, I should have the freedom of choice to do that. Freedom of association. If my faith does not allow me to participate in these activities, I should be able to state that. That is not discrimination. And for the anti-freedom crowd to say that that's discriminatory is missing the mark completely. And I knew, folks, this is how well I know the anti-freedom crowd out there. I knew before I even started reading this article that they were going to get this wrong because of the title. Trump is planning an unconstitutional assault on LGBT rights. Let's see here. Presuming Thursday's order is substantially similar to the February leak, it will serve one primary purpose: allowing federal employees and contractors to discriminate against LGBTQ people with immunity. It does nothing of the sort. It does nothing of the sort. See, what they're trying to do is the same thing with pre-existing conditions, which we're going to talk about in a second. What they're trying to do is trying to obfuscate the actual facts with this. All this is, it's just another way of people discriminating against people. And folks, people discriminate against me all the time. Quite honestly, I don't care. Their loss as far as I'm concerned. And if I decide, I'm going to try to make it up to Dave here, if I decide in my life not to associate myself with bald people, I dare say 50% of the men that I know that and I respect and admire would instantly leave my life. And from a Christian standpoint, from a freedom standpoint, I'd be a fool in the extreme to do so. Because there are a lot of men out there that I know that I totally respect. No matter how follically challenged they are. They're good people. And like I said, I'd be stupid in the extreme to base my association on something so non-insequential. I mean, I'd be an idiot, in other words. But on the other hand, if me living my life and living my principles, especially my Christian principles, excludes me from participating in something that goes against my religious beliefs, gay marriage, because I'm told in the New Testament, time and time again, and the Old Testament, that a marriage is between a man and a woman, period. There is no other marriage described in the New Testament, period. Dave says you can still cover the bruise with makeup, but it still hurts. God love you, Dave, because I do too. So we see here we have folks in the LG that are supporting this as far as a discriminatory executive order. They're going to find a judge. I know this in my heart. They're going to find a judge that's going to stay this executive order. And then you're going to have folks like the Christian Baker, who did not want to participate in a gay union or gay marriage because it goes against her religious beliefs, and God bless her for standing up for her principles. But now this woman's facing insurmountable fines, losing her business, the whole nine yards because of this, because these people, this gay couple, were either one, too lazy to go find another baker that would bake their cake and participate in their ceremony, or two, and I think this is the more hurtful of the two, they targeted this bakery because it was Christian, and they knew the reaction. And I think it's the second one, because especially with the baker, and I'm pretty sure the florist that's undergoing this. I'm not sure so much about the photographer, but the florist and the baker had a long-standing relationship with these individuals, or them as a couple. They came in and purchased goods, either flowers or baked goods over years and years. So they must have known about each other, and I don't doubt there might have been some conversations along the lines of her faith. A Christian shares their faith, and these folks and their ideas. So honestly, I think it was the second one where they were targeting them. They were targeting them, and they were targeted. And this whole idea that you can't pick and choose your associations, especially in business. Well, what's next? What's next for a business owner if another business comes up that is very, and let me use an absurdity here. Let's say a known drug dealer comes in there and wants the baker to bake a cake for a birthday party for one of the Goombas that's in the gang that deals drugs. Should the baker go against their law and order principles to do that? Now, they may have to think about some life principles here if refusing that, but you see what I'm saying here. We should be able to choose in our businesses who we associate with. That does not mean we turn away all of our customers, because interacting with a customer, if they come into our place of business to purchase a good or service, is in no way condoning their lifestyle. But to come in as a business like a caterer or a baker and participate, and like I said, I'm going to use the drug dealers, and I might be offending drug dealers out there, and I really don't care. If I know you're a known drug dealer, and I know the people you hang out with are drug dealers that support you in your illegal enterprise, it's one thing for them to come into the store to buy my goods. But it's a whole nother ball game if you ask me to come over and cater a party for all your drug dealing buddies that you want to. You're having sort of like a drug party over there to showcase your wares to other buyers and other drug dealers, and you don't want to be a part of that. It's the same principle going on here, folks. It really is. And all this executive order, from what I read about it last night, all this executive order is doing is saying that people, even religious people, are allowed to have freedom of association. It's just that simple. But the anti-freedom LGBTQ community out there is going to make something bigger out of it than what it is. They're going to use lies and falsehoods. And I just, talked about that in our daily Bible reading, that, you don't get very far with that. You really don't. And quite honestly, people who support that type of ideology are part of the problem. There are some good people out there, the quote-unquote religious people out there, that don't think there's anything wrong with that. They think that baker should have went against her religious principles and participated in that ceremony. There are people out there like that. And I say shame on them also, because they're definitely not standing up for their Christian principles. Dave says Proverbs 32:1 says, hair today, gone tomorrow. We have a lot of fun on here poking fun at each other on this show, folks. We really do. All right, so we covered that executive order today. Now, you might have some more questions about that. If you do, and you're listening to this in podcast or watching this later on YouTube, please email me. I encourage you to email me, or go over to my Twitter account, send me a direct message, or Facebook. I'm not afraid to answer questions and tell you my stance on things. And I honestly believe if I stand up for God and his principles and his word, that God will take care of me. Now, I may take a big hit in the secular community, but in the end, I think God's going to take care of me because I was faithful to him. And that's, folks, that's who I ultimately need to be concerned about. Is concerned with is God. All right, the second thing today I really want to get into is the replacement. And folks, I just, please, if there's Republicans listening to me out there, please grow a backbone. And what do I mean by, especially those in Congress, Republicans in Congress, what do I mean by grow a backbone? I think you need a different Speaker of the House. I really, really do. I know there's people out there that disagree with me. I think Paul Ryan, at best, if you want to go to the left-right paradigm, he's a moderate at best. He's not a conservative. I don't think he ever has been. Just like George W. Bush. George W. Bush was never a conservative. He was always a moderate. But I'm trying to get away from the left-right paradigm. I'm going for the freedom, anti-freedom paradigm, and I believe that Paul Ryan is firmly in the anti-freedom paradigm. He's about, like a lot of other Republicans on Capitol Hill, he's about garnering and keeping power. That's all there is to it. Now, I want to get to this, the free market approach. Let's see here. This was written back in 2012, October, by Avik Roy. Free market approach to pre-existing conditions is better than Obamacare. And it goes through the history here a little bit, and I'm just going to go over this now. He does put a disclosure in there that Mr. Roy is an outside advisor for the Romney campaign on health care issues. The opinions contained herein are mine alone and do not necessarily correspond with those of the campaign. Now, he talks about World War II era wage controls triggering the pre-existing condition problem. This is why I said pre-existing conditions is, as far as health insurance is concerned, is a government-created problem. Now, part of the problem was FDR was sticking his nose in the economy for years, being the good little socialist that he is. And there was a law passed 1942 under FDR that mandated wage ceilings for a broad range of occupations and required federal approval for any change of those. He was afraid that the lack of people in the workforce would cause wages to rise and then spiral out of control along with inflation. And see, so he, like George W. Bush, I abandoned free market principles to save the free market. And FDR was the originator of this, folks. So it was called the Economic Stabilization Act of 1942. But fringe benefits weren't included in this, such as health insurance, were not covered under the 1942 wage control. And as a result, many employers started offering health benefits as a way around the new federal wage limits. This loophole gained further strength when in 1943 a federal court held that employer-sponsored health insurance was exempt from taxation. And then that was strengthened also in the Internal Revenue Act of 1954, which made it employers could deduct this cost as fringe benefit. So the tax exclusion disproportionately benefit high earners. And so the more money you made, the better off you made with the deduction. And this included companies. And so we see where the percentages would actually benefit a high earner. Okay, not against high earners, but this was a setup by the government, folks. And I honestly want you to go read this article. I'm just hitting the high points on it. And the main problem with this, because it was employer fringe benefit to the employee, the insurance stayed with the employer. So the main primary problem with the 1942 and the 1954 Act was that it strengthened the employer's position in all this. It made it easier for insurance companies to come in and negotiate with employers because there were big pools, and they pretty much left the individual insurance market to fester. And I won't say die, but to fester, and just they didn't really care about it. So the primary problem was what they called discontinuous health coverage. The reason why people fail, or why people fall victim to pre-existing conditions problems, is the discontinuance in coverage. If you lose your job, folks, you can't take your employer health care with you. Now, some people argue, well, you got COBRA coverage. I don't know if anybody's ever checked out COBRA coverage, but it's been my experience that in order to have the same policy that your employer had, you're going to pay whatever you were making, you were paying or contributing out of your pocket, out of payroll deductions. You might as well quadruple that at least, at minimum, to get the COBRA coverage. That's been my personal experience. So we see you can't keep the employer-based insurance. And this is causing the pre-existing condition problem, because if you had the insurance that you took with you and you developed a health issue and you didn't have, and if you lost your job due to no fault of your own, or you had to move or something like that, you take your health insurance with you. Okay, you see where I'm getting at here. And then the secondary problem is health insurance is too expensive. The second most important reason why we have pre-existing conditions problems is because insurance is too expensive, and the high cost of insurance is also largely due to the employer tax exclusion. Okay, you and I can't get a deduction on our taxes because of the amount of money we pay for our insurance, our health insurance through the employer. It doesn't work that way. And honestly, and this is just my opinion about taxes, we should get rid of all the deductions and just make the taxes as low as possible. I think Trump's took a good step in the right direction this way with the 3 tax brackets, and I think that'd go a long way to helping the middle class especially. But that's just my opinion. So they have charts and everything up here. But the main thing I want you to take away from this article, I'm not trying to smoke screen you by not covering the whole article here, which I'm not. I want you to go read that. But the main thing I want to say here is, because of after World War II and it becoming a fringe benefit that wasn't covered in the 1942 Act, that was cemented with the 1954 Act, the IRS Act, and you can't take your insurance with you. That's why we have pre-existing conditions. Now, I want to get to this Forbes article real quick before we end the show. I've got about 3 minutes. Let's see here. Where is that? Free market approach to pre-existing conditions is better than Obamacare. No, I just read that. I'm sorry. That's the one I just read. I want to get to this other one. 5 ways to make health insurance great again. Foundation Economic Education. And that's a good article here that we have put up in here. And the one thing that I want to get into, I'm trying to find the one article that I really highlighted some stuff in, and for whatever reasons, I can't find it. That ain't it. I do apologize, folks. I had one that was highlighted here about well, the CBO, Congressional Budget Office score on the AHCA is something I was complaining about, where they talk about 24 million people will be uninsured, but they're talking about that clear out to 2026, 9 years from now. And the fact of the matter is that the pre-existing conditions, see, I'm still looking for that article. I know I had it in here, and I actually highlighted a couple sections that I wanted to, oh, here it is. Okay, that was in that Forbes article. Excuse me, folks. Real quick here. The Congressional Budget Office study found that those who are uninsured, only about 3.5% were uninsured because of their health was too poor to qualify. On the other hand, 71% blamed the high cost of insurance for their lack of it. 3.5% of 55 million is 1.9 million, or 0.6% of the U.S. population. It's both a big number and a small number. If the CBO's numbers were right, the pre-existing conditions problem is one that we should pay attention to and try to fix, but without making things worse for the other 99.4% of the population. The number of people with this problem may be far lower than that. Obamacare created a set of high-risk pools that would provide subsidized insurance to people who have a pre-existing condition and have been without health coverage for at least 6 months, or the last 6 months, a reasonable definition of the population. The CBO estimated that up to 70,000 individuals would enroll in the program. As of July 1st or 31st, 2012, only 82,000 had signed up. So I believe the numbers are actually smaller than what the anti-freedom crowd would have you believe that they actually are. And this, folks, is very, very important. Those numbers are very, very important because the anti-freedom crowd out there won't give you the exact numbers that you need. They won't explain to you what's actually going on. They're making the problem. They're taking bits and pieces of facts and gluing them together to come up and support their pre-existing conclusions. And that's what I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, about these pre-existing conclusions that these folks have that they go back and cherry pick. And that's exactly what they're doing, like Indivisible and Common Cause and the George Soros crowd out there, the anti-freedom crowd. That's exactly what they're doing, is they're cherry picking facts to support their pre-existing conclusions. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, folks, and join us tomorrow for Free for All Friday. We're going to talk about the Second Amendment and the idiotic idea that if you defend yourself, you're denying your oppressor a fair trial, according to these anti-Second Amendment folks. So God bless and have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow on the show.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.